It was 6:17 p.m. when I looked up and saw it. A drone, small, silent, and circling directly above my backyard. My twin girls were playing on the trampoline, giggling in mid-flip, completely unaware that someone was filming them from above. I dropped my gardening shears, sprinted toward them, and shouted for them to get inside. The drone dipped lower, hovered for just a second too long, then zipped away like a coward. I didn't know who was behind it. Not yet. But the next morning, my suspicion was confirmed in the most vile, smug way possible. HOA Karen stood at the edge of my lawn with a twisted smile and said, "You should thank me. It's called neighborhood safety." That's when I knew she'd been spying on my children, with a drone, for weeks. What kind of deranged psychopath thinks they can surveil a federal judge's family like they're contestants on some trashy reality show? You ever wonder what happens when the person you violate turns out to be the one who writes the law? It started with the faint buzz, like a mosquito with delusions of grandeur. I didn't think much of it at first. I was on my hands and knees in the soil, planting lavender along the west fence of our backyard. My daughters just a few feet away, chasing each other around the oak tree with those squealing, hiccuping laughs that only kids can pull off. The sun was gold. The air smelled like rosemary and new mulch. It was the kind of suburban peace people fantasize about when they move into HOA neighborhoods like ours. Then that buzz passed over my shoulder, mechanical and intrusive, and I looked up to see it, a drone, small, white, and hovering just above the property line, its lens locked on my daughters. I stood up, waved my arms. It twitched midair, then zipped up and vanished behind the maple trees like it had been caught peeping through a window. I knew exactly what I'd seen. And I knew exactly who it belonged to. Karen, HOA president, walking restraining order in a tennis visor. The woman had made herself famous for nitpicking flower bed arrangements and measuring people's mailboxes with a damn ruler. But this was a different level. I walked straight inside, pulled open my laptop, and logged into the HOA's community oversight portal, a grotesque invention that masqueraded as a neighborly message board, but was really a digital panopticon where Karen and her volunteer spies could post passive-aggressive reminders about lawn heights, fence paint, and unauthorized celebrations. That's where I found it. A thread labeled Safety Review, Lot 40, 2, Judge's Residence, My House. The post was from Karen. Embedded in the thread was a 42-second drone clip, aerial footage of my daughters playing on the trampoline, laughing and doing cartwheels. A red circle had been drawn around my youngest, Hannah, with the caption, "Concern? Possible clothing? Non-compliance? Underage exposure?" I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared. My hands curled into fists so tight my wedding band cut skin. She had filmed my children, uploaded it, annotated it like some sick digital game of I Spy, and beneath it, comments from HOA members. Too close to the property line? Is that trampoline regulation height? Why aren't they wearing shirts? The implications simmered like acid. Not one person asked the real question, why the hell are we watching children through a drone? I immediately posted a reply. Blunt, concise, judicial. Remove this post immediately. This is a privacy violation and constitutes digital surveillance of minors without consent. 2 minutes later, Karen responded. As HOA president, I am authorized to document potential community violations via aerial compliance monitoring. The footage is within guidelines of Article 14C, Neighborhood Safety Initiative. Please refer to the bylaws. No apology, no shame, just bureaucratic word vomit to justify watching little girls from the sky. I grabbed my phone and called her, straight to voicemail. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a federal judge. I write the standards people like Karen pretend to enforce. That evening, I requested a formal HOA hearing to address the violation and demand new policies on surveillance. The request was denied. No violation occurred. The response read, "Drone footage is permitted under community charter as long as it pertains to neighborhood compliance." My blood went cold. That night, I didn't sleep. My wife and I sat up reviewing every HOA document we'd signed when we bought the house. No clause about drones, nothing about recording minors. Nothing that should have given her permission to spy on our family like we were under investigation. The next morning, a citation showed up on our door. Violation. Recreational equipment. Unregistered trampoline. Fine. $175. I laughed out loud, the kind of sharp, dangerous laugh that has no joy in it. Karen was retaliating. Less than 24 hours after I pushed back, she fired the first shot. The trampoline had been there for 2 years. No prior complaints. It wasn't about the trampoline. It was about control. 2 days later, I caught the drone again, hovering lower this time, barely 30 feet above the backyard as my wife sunbathed beside our girls. I ran out and threw a wrench at it. Missed. It shot up like a coward caught in the act and vanished into the trees. This time, I checked the HOA's site. No new footage, but the citation ticker had updated. Violation, landscaping overgrowth, perimeter invasion of native shrubs. Fine, $85. I'd trimmed the hedges that morning. It was war. I installed motion lights. Bought my own drone jamming gun, legal under FAA guidelines for private property interference. My wife begged me to let it go, to just cover the trampoline, to avoid drawing more attention, but I couldn't. That night, a neighbor texted me something that made my skin crawl. It was a screenshot from the HOA's internal messaging. Slack, leaked to them by an anonymous board member. Karen had posted a message labeled, "High-risk lots, close watch." Our address was at the top. Under it, Judge family, multiple visual alerts, compliance pending, continue documentation, drone 2, will rotate for night cycles. Night cycles. She was flying drones over our house at night. While my daughters slept, while my wife changed, while we lived, my face flushed with a heat I hadn't felt since my days on the bench sentencing sex offenders and predators. This wasn't policy. This was perversion, dressed in paperwork. I called a special meeting. The board refused to schedule it. I demanded an audit of drone operations. They ignored me. I submitted a cease and desist. No reply. Instead, more violations arrived. One for excessive foot traffic in the side yard. Another for non-uniform lighting, porch ambiance outside community hue range. I stared at that one for a full minute, wondering if I was still in reality or had slipped into some Kafka nightmare sponsored by Ring and Nextdoor. Then came the final straw. My wife discovered one of the HOA's pole-mounted surveillance cameras had been disabled, wires cut, footage deleted for a 48-hour block. When I demanded a review, the board claimed it was routine maintenance. That same week, another drone appeared. This one buzzed just 10 feet above my roof. I walked out in my robe, stared directly at it, and gave it a small, deliberate wave. It hovered, watching. Then zipped away. I didn't have hard proof it was Karen's, but I knew. My girls weren't playing outside anymore. The trampoline sat unused. The garden wilted because my wife stopped going out in the afternoons. She said she didn't feel safe. She didn't feel watched. She knew she was. My home had become a panopticon. My yard, a stage for HOA voyeurism. And Karen, she wasn't afraid. She was proud. She thought she was winning. But she forgot something crucial. In her obsession with enforcing rules, she broke the law. And I don't just interpret the law. I am the law. She had no idea how badly she just violated the wrong man's family. And this was only the beginning. It started with a scream. My youngest daughter jolted upright in bed, sheets tangled around her legs, tears streaming down her cheeks before she could even explain what had happened. She kept saying the same thing over and over, in that shaky voice that makes your chest cave in as a parent. The robot was in my room again. I sat beside her, held her close, wiped her face. But I couldn't say what I wanted to. I couldn't tell her she was wrong. Because she wasn't. She'd seen the drone, reflected in her window, hovering outside at night, its silent little eye watching her from the dark like some soulless, floating predator. My wife had tried to downplay it the first time, tried to pretend it was just a security drone on a routine flight. But kids know when they're being watched. They know when they're not safe. And now my girls had stopped sleeping through the night. They moved as a pair, even inside the house, like a pack of deer that's learned too well the sounds of the hunter's footsteps. The old innocence was gone. My oldest had taken to closing every curtain the second the sun dipped, then checking each one twice. My wife caught her once stuffing a towel under the crack in her door, so the camera can't see my feet. She was 11. A week later, my wife found the second drone. Not in the air, not buzzing over the lawn. Hidden, tucked deep inside a decorative birdhouse that we'd mounted 2 years ago above the garden fence, the one facing the backyard patio where we drank coffee on quiet Sundays. The moment she lifted it off its hook to dust the inside, it rattled, metal clinking against plastic. Inside was a black-lensed camera module, rigged with a mini battery and Wi-Fi booster, tucked behind a few fake pine cones like some grotesque peeping Tom's nesting doll. My wife screamed. I got there in 3 seconds, and what I saw made me forget how to breathe. I recognized the make immediately. HOA issued tech, standard for the Community Security Initiative. Karen pushed through at last year's annual meeting. But those devices were supposed to be mounted in plain view. This was covert. This was planted. This was a felony. I sealed it in a Ziploc, labeled it, logged the time, and placed it in my safe. Then I called the HOA. No answer. I sent 3 emails. No reply. I drove to the HOA's field office, a renovated tool shed beside the tennis courts, wrapped in vinyl siding and delusions of authority, and found the door locked. A sign read, "Closed for staff training. Reopen Monday." It was Wednesday. The next day, a white SUV with magnetic OA compliance enforcement stickers parked across the street from our house. Inside sat 2 men in matching polos, sunglasses, and clipboards, pretending to inspect their dashboard while obviously watching our lawn. They stayed for 4 hours. Did not exit, did not knock. Just watched. At 4:12 p.m., one of them stepped out, took a photo of our mailbox, then our porch, then my daughter's soccer net, and then left. That evening, a new citation arrived. Violation: unauthorized recreational equipment, obstruction of aesthetic line of sight. The equipment was the soccer net. It had been there for 9 months, no previous complaints. My wife broke down crying when she opened the envelope. Not loud, not dramatic, just a slow leak of silent tears as she sat on the stairs with her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. "And me?" I snapped. I stormed across the street and banged on Karen's door with the kind of knock you save for war. She answered like she'd been waiting, hair perfect, lips smug, clipboard already in hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, the words floating out like they were dipped in syrup. "You need to stop," I said, voice low, jaw tight. "You need to stop watching my family. Stop harassing my children. Stop using drones like they're binoculars for your sick power trip." Her smile widened. She didn't deny it. "Article 14C permits aerial surveillance for compliance verification," she said, eyes glittering. "It's in the bylaws." I took a step closer. "That birdhouse had a camera in it. You planted it. That's not compliance. That's criminal." "Oh, that?" she said, chuckling. "That unit was misplaced. A contractor error. You're welcome to file a grievance." I stared at her, trying to decide whether to scream or laugh. Then she leaned in and whispered, "You're not untouchable, Judge. You're just another homeowner with an attitude problem." Then louder, for the benefit of whoever she knew was listening, "I suggest you de-escalate, or we may have to escalate ourselves." The door slammed shut. 2 hours later, another white SUV pulled up. This time, it parked on our side of the street. A man stepped out and walked to the perimeter of my lawn with a clipboard, taking photos of everything: the gutters, the hose, the bird bath. I walked out to confront him. He handed me a slip of paper and walked away without a word. Notice of pending assessment. Suspected noncompliance with irrigation policy. I hadn't even watered the lawn that week. That night, I pulled out my case files. Not from court, from the HOA. I opened a fresh binder and labeled it 14C, Karen. I filed every violation, every photo, every timestamp. I printed drone paths from my jamming system. screenshotted Slack leaks. I started drawing connections. That's when I found them. I pulled up the HOA's internal complaint board, something I only had access to because of a neighbor who once served on the compliance committee and still had his login credentials. In that board were threads from other residents. Residents who had all filed similar complaints. Drone over my pool. Inspector filming my teen son mowing the lawn. Camera pointed at my daughter's bedroom window. Most of them had been ignored. Some were deleted. A few had chilling replies from Karen herself. One stood out. Parents should be grateful we're watching when they can't. Another. The difference between surveillance and safety is only who's behind the lens. I felt sick. This wasn't about enforcement. It wasn't even about my family anymore. Karen had built a culture of weaponized paranoia, an HOA regime fueled by voyeurism and masked as order. I went door to door that weekend, not ranting, not preaching, just listening. I talked to over a dozen families. 7 of them had received unexplained drone footage citations. 4 had kids who reported seeing floating bugs with red eyes outside their windows. One woman had called the HOA after spotting a man in a vest pointing a camera at her daughter's bedroom and was fined $100 for hostile interaction with safety personnel. Each story added weight to my theory. Karen wasn't just violating my home. She was running a community-wide surveillance operation, and every HOA fine was just camouflage. Every compliance officer was an enforcer with a lens. And the drones? They were just the beginning. This wasn't neighborhood management. This was tyranny. And it was targeting children, including mine. That night, as I filed away the latest testimony, I looked over at my daughters sleeping on the couch, curled up beneath blankets, porch lights off, because they didn't feel safe in their own beds. My wife stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes hollow. She didn't say it, but I saw it in her face. We weren't living. We were being watched, harassed, tracked. My home was a crime scene, and the perpetrator was the president of the HOA. I sat down at my desk, turned on the lamp, and wrote the words that would ignite the war. Exhibit A, Pattern of Digital Harassment Against Minors by HOA Authority Figures. Karen had built her empire on fear and silence, but she forgot one thing. The courtroom is my home turf. And in that arena, I don't just win. I end people. She thought she had eyes everywhere. She didn't realize mine were already fixed on her. It was a Tuesday. The sky was clean, the kind of blue you only get after a hard storm. My girls were home early from school, the district water system down for repairs, and I had just lit the grill for a late lunch when my wife came stumbling out of the house like she'd been punched. Her face had gone white, mouth moving, but no words came out. I dropped the tongs, met her halfway across the patio. "What is it?" I asked, already scanning for danger, half expecting to hear sirens or see smoke. She didn't answer. She just held out her phone with a shaking hand. On the screen was a video, paused at the 30-second mark. I didn't know what I was looking at. It took me longer than it should have. The angle was aerial, angled down toward the east side of our backyard. Specifically, toward the pool shed where our daughters change after swimming. I recognized the time of day immediately from the long shadows and the way the light hit the grass. This had been filmed 3 days ago. My daughter Lily was captured mid-motion, towel slung around her shoulders, just starting to pull her swimsuit straps off in the shadow of the shed door. The video had been slowed down. Not by accident. Deliberately. The motion was choppy. The resolution sharpened, like someone had processed it with editing software to isolate the movement, to highlight it. Across the top, in bold white text, was a watermark that read, "Possible incident, need review." My jaw locked. I reached out, hit play. The rest of the clip was silent but loaded. It showed Lily pulling on her t-shirt, stepping out barefoot, completely unaware she'd been watched. The video zoomed slightly, tracking her steps, before cutting out. Then, at the bottom of the post, a caption from Karen. Observed during routine aerial review. Minor subject engaging in potentially inappropriate outdoor changing behavior. Logged under child safety protocol for review by board. I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. My wife whispered, "Kelsey, from 3 blocks over, sent it." She's on the board Slack but never checks it. Saw this and called me in tears. I couldn't hear her anymore. My ears were ringing. I felt like I was on the bench again, watching evidence of abuse unspool on a courtroom screen, except this wasn't someone else's child. This was mine, my little girl, in a private moment. In her own backyard, targeted, framed, exploited. I took the phone inside, loaded the Slack archive Kelsey had sent over. The thread was there. Karen had titled it 14C Red Flag, Lot 42, Minor Alert. 4 board members had seen it. One replied with, "Yikes, might need to blur the subject," but agreed, "looks sketchy." Another responded with a damn emoji. The Slack had a private channel named Compliance Media, escalated, filled with drone captures from other houses, none as grotesque as ours, but all wrong. One showed a boy playing on a trampoline with a note, "Is this trampoline in code?" Another showed a woman gardening in shorts. The caption, "Unsure if this is tenant or guest. Worth checking lease?" Karen had built a digital peep show and called it oversight. But this, what she did to Lily, this was a crime. I filed the complaint that night, not to the HOA, to the county sheriff's office. Then to the state attorney general's digital crimes division. I included a copy of the video, the Slack thread, timestamps, everything. My wife wanted to go to the news. I told her not yet. Not before I could build the case airtight. Not before I could gut Karen legally. 2 days later, as if she sensed the walls closing in, Karen doubled down. It was our neighborhood summer barbecue, a tradition I'd never skipped, even when I couldn't stomach HOA politics. We showed up with pasta salad, forced smiles, trying to pretend our family wasn't under siege. The smell of ribs and sunscreen hung in the air. Kids laughed on bounce houses, and Karen, in her pink-collared shirt and surgically smug smile, stood near the HOA tent like a queen inspecting the peasantry. I ignored her, until I heard it. That buzz. I looked up, a drone. Not just hovering this time, descending. Fast, intentional, toward me. I watched it angled downward, full speed, like a bullet with propellers. I stepped back, just as it zipped past my face, close enough to ruffle my hair and knock the brim off my hat. My youngest daughter screamed. Everyone turned. The drone spun, hovered above the grill for a beat, then shot up and away over the clubhouse roof. Karen didn't flinch. She sipped her lemonade, didn't look at me, but the corner of her mouth twitched, and that's when I saw it. She was daring me to react, to make a scene, to become the angry judge she could frame as unstable. But she miscalculated. She hadn't noticed who was standing nearby. My court clerk, Janine, was there, visiting her aunt 2 houses down. She had seen the whole thing. And she didn't just see it as a bystander. She saw it as someone who had watched me sentence men for cyberstalking, for digital voyeurism, for child exploitation. And now she had just watched a community leader weaponize a drone against the daughter of a federal judge on camera. She walked over. Quiet, calm, clipped voice. "Sir, would you like me to begin logging this for the office?" I didn't look at her. I didn't nod. I just said, yes. Karen had just made the worst mistake of her life. She had gone from petty tyrant to federal defendant, but she didn't even realize it yet. I went home, opened a secure drive, uploaded every piece of evidence, sent it to the ethics officer at the U.S. Attorney's office, CC'd the district cyber unit, and tagged it with a line I've only used once in my career. Urgent escalation. Civil oversight breach now crossing into criminal. The next morning, the drone returned. But this time, I was ready. I activated the jamming signal the second it crossed into our airspace. It dropped like a stone, clipped a branch, and crashed onto our lawn in a mess of broken plastic and twisted rotors. I picked it up, placed it in a sealed evidence bag, labeled it Exhibit C, and called the sheriff again. Karen arrived an hour later, fake surprised, demanding her property back. I told her I'd be happy to return it to the chain of custody officer handling the case. She tried to smile, tried to threaten, Tried to warn me again that Article 14C protects all aerial observation. I told her she wasn't in a homeowners association anymore. She was in my courtroom now, and she just confessed. Out loud, with witnesses. She didn't reply. She turned, walked away, and for the first time, her walk wasn't smug. It was quick, controlled, afraid, because she knew. She had tried to humiliate my daughter, to provoke me in front of neighbors, to fly a drone directly at my head during a community event. And now, the damage was done. Every move recorded, every file logged, every Slack thread preserved in full. Karen thought she was just harassing another rule breaker. She didn't know she'd crossed into federal territory, and the man she'd targeted wasn't a landscaper or a retiree with time to argue over fences. He was the one who decides which lives get shattered in a courtroom. And hers was next. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't send threats through the HOA inbox like some furious neighbor with a grudge and a keyboard. I did what I've always done when something needs to be buried in court. I built the shovel first, quietly, surgically, and then I started digging. At 7:03, the morning after the barbecue, I placed a call to a colleague in D.C., someone with access to federal compliance systems. We exchanged no pleasantries, just the essentials. I need a full review of all drone activity registered under Sunny Ridge HOA, including flight IDs, operator credentials, and all submissions to the FAA regarding community surveillance. He didn't ask why. Didn't need to. 40 minutes later, I had 3 PDFs sitting in a private cloud folder, encrypted, time-stamped, legally sourced. Drone 7BEX was the unit that Karen had flown at the barbecue. The flight logs? They showed it violating my property line 16 times over the past 90 days, sometimes for minutes at a time, loitering above my children's trampoline, patio, bedroom windows. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, watching the screen like it was a confession booth with no priest present. Then I sent a text to my assistant, Riley. We need a motion. Emergency injunction. Start with trespass, add digital harassment, and flag privacy statutes on minor surveillance. Request expedited review. Riley didn't waste time. She was the kind of assistant who took pride in formatting footnotes like scalpels. Within 2 hours, I had a 38-page petition ready for signature. I signed it electronically, included the flight data, and filed it with our local circuit court. Not because I needed it to win, I filed it because I wanted Karen to feel it. To see her name on official docket paperwork, flagged in red. Respondent. Emergency order pending. But that wasn't the kill shot. That was just the first ripple. The next came when I called an old contact at the DOJ's Cyber Division. I need a friendly read on a surveillance case. HOA officer. Multiple minors. Unauthorized recording. Potential distribution. He paused, then asked, Does she know who she's dealing with? I answered, She thinks I'm a homeowner. He laughed. She's going to need more than bylaws to crawl out of this one. I hung up and turned to the stack of materials on my desk. HOA policy manuals, Karen's Slack screenshots, neighborhood citations tagged with incident flags. I started pulling threads. First was the community charter Karen had amended last year, Article 14C, the same one she loved to quote, like it was scripture. It authorized non-invasive surveillance measures for safety compliance. But buried in the appendix was a clause about consent. All community members must be notified in writing and provided with opt-out procedures for residential surveillance beyond perimeter-level observation. No one had received that notice. Not one of the 17 families I personally contacted. I gathered statements: a pregnant woman filmed in her backyard, a teenage boy photographed while mowing his lawn shirtless, an elderly man cited 3 times for having his granddaughter over for unauthorized youth visitation. Each story had a pattern: surveillance, citation, silence. Karen's system didn't protect the neighborhood, it punished it. With that in hand, I issued a private request to the HOA's third-party legal team for full discovery. All internal communications regarding drone operations, member footage, Slack archives, and incident reviews conducted by Karen. They declined. I didn't push. Instead, I filed a subpoena under federal judicial authority. That afternoon, the entire HOA server was seized under a preservation order. Karen would find out the next morning when her login credentials failed. But the real bombshell dropped when I tracked the drone manufacturer, a small company out of Colorado, Skytrack Pro. I submitted a formal data request for any logs associated with Drone 7BEX, registered to the Sunny Ridge Homeowners Association. Because their system's auto-backup cloud telemetry, they sent me everything. Location history, flight paths, access timestamps. Even a maintenance report from the week Karen had the birdhouse camera installed. One entry in particular made my spine stiffen. Proximity alert triggered. Altitude drop detected. Vicinity, minor residence back patio. Duration, 542s. Operator override, manual hover. 5 minutes and 42 seconds. Watching, hovering. No automatic patrol would do that. That was someone holding a controller, staring. I printed the logs, blacked out the irrelevant data, and added them to the binder labeled HOA Surveillance Protocol Abuse. At this point, my office had become a command center. Screens showing aerial maps, drone ID overlays, Slack screenshots, frozen on Karen's incriminating captions. I wasn't just prosecuting a neighbor anymore. I was dismantling a system. That evening, I got word from Riley. Restraining order granted. Circuit Court judge signed it 15 minutes ago. Karen can't operate drones or deploy HOA surveillance within 300 feet of your residence. Any violation triggers automatic contempt proceedings. I smiled. Small, quiet, focused. But I wasn't done. I drafted a cease and desist on behalf of 5 families. Not addressed to Karen, addressed to the entire HOA board. I made it clear. Continued operations under Article 14C constitute breach of privacy statutes and open board members to personal civil liability. Your indemnity clause is invalid under malicious enforcement precedent. Discovery has already begun. I included select quotes from Karen, just enough to scare them, just enough to show them she wasn't worth defending. Within 24 hours, 2 board members resigned. By the end of the week, the HOA removed Karen's administrative access from the member portal. But the icing? That came from the DOJ. They called me directly. We flagged this for Joint Investigation, Cybercrime, and Child Exploitation Task Force. You'll be looped in as the initiating complainant. You might be called to testify if it goes federal. Good, I said. She needs to be buried in real statutes, not her made-up ones. That same night, Karen showed up on my lawn. No drones. No clipboard. Just her hollow-eyed, frantic lips twitching like a liar trying to remember their last lie. She asked to speak. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. You can't destroy me over a misunderstanding, she hissed. I was trying to protect this community. I stepped forward. You targeted my children. You filmed them changing. You flew a drone at my head in front of 50 people. You built a library of violations based on who you didn't like, and you called it safety. You don't deserve this community. You deserve a cell. She opened her mouth. I held up my phone. You're violating a court order just standing here. She backed away like I'd drawn a weapon, and in a way I had. She left, without another word. Her SUV peeled out so fast it clipped the HOA signpost. I didn't flinch, just turned around and went back to work. That night, I filed the final document. Petition to dismantle Article 14C, OA Surveillance Authority. It wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about principle, about law, about stripping a tyrant of her tools. Karen never understood that power doesn't come from fear. It comes from restraint. And now, for the first time, she was being introduced to it, line by line, page by page, statute by statute. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to rewrite the rules. And by the time I was done, the only footage Karen would be part of was a courtroom security camera, capturing the moment a federal judge sentenced her for turning safety into surveillance and community into control. It was a Friday morning when it finally happened. The sky was gray, the kind of pale haze that presses down like judgment. and I was already dressed in a black suit, not for a courtroom, but because I knew exactly what the day would bring. I'd made the call the night before, not to the HOA, not to Karen, to the U.S. Marshals. "It's time," I said simply. They didn't need clarification. The federal case had been active for 2 weeks by then. A sealed complaint had been filed through DOJ Cybercrime and Federal Child Safety Enforcement, naming Karen Withers, president of the Sunny Ridge HOA, as the primary defendant in a case involving digital harassment of minors, unauthorized aerial surveillance, and intent to distribute private footage without consent. 37 pages, 6 statutes violated. 4 were federal. My daughters' names were redacted, but their faces appeared in Exhibits B through D, grainy but damning. Captured through drones Karen operated herself, footage she uploaded to private channels and labeled compliance materials. I hadn't just brought evidence. I brought the kind of legal firepower that makes lesser judges blink twice before putting pen to paper. My personal affidavit was included, of course, but so were depositions from 7 families, screen captures, drone manufacturer logs, FAA records, Slack messages, and yes, the slowed video clip of my daughter changing, labeled Possible Incident. That alone carried a maximum penalty of 5 years. By 9:17 a.m., the USS Marshals were parked 2 blocks from the HOA clubhouse, black SUVs idling low, unmarked jackets pulled over ballistic vests. Inside the clubhouse, Karen had just begun the Emergency Compliance Alignment Session, a meeting she'd called herself in an attempt to stop the bleeding. 2 more board members had quit that week, citing internal misconduct concerns. She thought she was going to claw back control. Instead, she got arrested. I didn't attend the meeting. I didn't need to. But I watched the live feed. One of the remaining HOA members streamed to the neighborhood Slack, thinking she was documenting more drama. What she captured was history. Karen standing at the front, holding her clipboard like a shield, mid-sentence about defending the HOA's sacred duty when the doors opened. 2 marshals stepped inside, one with cuffs, one with a warrant. "Karen Withers," the taller one said, his voice professional, not cruel. "You are under arrest for violations of federal child privacy laws, unlawful surveillance, and digital harassment of protected individuals." Karen blinked, laughed. "This is ridiculous," she said, stepping back, clutching her folder of citations like it would protect her. "This is a private meeting." "We're not here for the meeting," the other marshal interrupted. "We're here for you." She hesitated, looked at the rest of the room. No one stood. No one spoke. Even her last loyal board member had dropped her pen. The handcuffs clicked. Karen's mouth kept moving, but nothing coherent came out. The stream cut off 30 seconds later. Too late. The clip went viral before lunch. HOA president arrested for spying on children with drones. The headline read on the front page of the local paper. Federal judge's family at center of case. I didn't release the details. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Karen's mugshot hit the evening news. Her eyes were wide. Her lips were curled just slightly, like she still hadn't fully accepted what had happened. That she'd gone from the self-appointed queen of a suburban cul-de-sac to a federally charged defendant in less than a week. The entire neighborhood watched in stunned silence. The HOA went into lockdown. Its website crashed. The board, what remained of it, attempted to issue a statement, something about rogue interpretations of policy and individual misuse of resources, but the Department of Housing had already stepped in. A temporary suspension was issued for all HOA activities. A federal oversight officer was assigned. The Sunny Ridge Homeowners Association was effectively dead. I didn't celebrate. Not publicly. Not yet. I was still working, still drafting the civil actions on behalf of the other parents. 3 families filed suit within 48 hours. I helped them all, quietly, offering template filings and case strategy without ever appearing in court. I had already done enough damage. Karen was given 12 months of house arrest under federal supervision. She was banned for life from holding any leadership, advisory, or enforcement position in any registered HOA, neighborhood committee, or community standards board. Her devices were seized. Her cloud accounts wiped. Her federal ID flagged. She wasn't just removed, she was erased from the world of petty power she had lived in. She moved out of Sunny Ridge 3 weeks later under a gag order. I watched the moving van roll past my house, her SUV trailing behind it, driven by a man I didn't recognize. She didn't look up, she didn't wave. Her window was tinted, her future darker. The house sat empty for a month. Then a family with 2 young boys moved in. No HOA violations, no citations, no drones, just life. Meanwhile, the DOJ quietly began auditing 5 other neighborhoods with similar surveillance policies. Karen had been the first. She wouldn't be the last. That summer, I bought my daughters a new trampoline. Larger, enclosed, covered. Not because I feared another drone, there wouldn't be one, but because they deserved safety and joy without fear. We set it up one Saturday morning, no buzz overhead. Just birds, laughter, and a soft wind. I sat on the porch afterward, coffee in hand, watching them bounce under the wide-open sky. No shadows, no watchers, no rules scribbled by power-hungry neighbors with too much time and too little morality. My wife sat beside me, eyes closed, face relaxed for the first time in weeks. She reached over, took my hand. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, we did it. I just made sure they heard us." She smiled, leaned her head against my shoulder, and we watched our girls soar. We didn't need a plaque, or a thank you, or an HOA to approve the moment. We had silence, peace, privacy, and justice. And for the first time in months, the only thing flying over our home was a kite my youngest had launched herself. That's how it ends. Not with an argument, not with a meeting, with freedom, with laughter, with children safe in their yard, and a father sipping coffee in full knowledge that nothing, no drone, no fine, no clipboard-wielding tyrant would ever touch them again. Not while he was still here. Not ever again.